Hello everyone and welcome back to another album review, and in this video I'm going to review Faster by Lil Texas. This is the debut full-length album of hardstyle and hardcore EDM producer, and with all of the other subgenres surrounding those genres, Lil Texas. Now, since the announcement of this album, I was actually really looking forward to it. I was really anticipating a full-length album out of Lil Texas. From everything that I've heard so far, I'm quite invested in his works. In my opinion, he has done some pretty cool singles, some tracks that I really enjoy a lot, especially when it comes to some of the older stuff, which would be much more hard-hitting and intense. I think that he's a really good producer. I really like his experimentations with some more breakcore stuff at times. With a lot of glitchy parts, the overall production sounds really good, and I definitely like the energy of his works, even if it's slightly toned down a bit, and I haven't been really that much invested into some of the latest singles that he did, but I was still definitely looking forward to this album. Now, I wasn't necessarily expecting much out of it, especially when it comes to consistency. I was mostly expecting that this was gonna be an album that would be a bit of a mess. It would just be a collection of songs, not really connecting that much one to each other or having any consistency, which I don't really have an issue with it. I mean, it's something that it's quite usual to the genre. For the most part, it just feels like a collection of songs. To my surprise though, I believe that it's quite interesting how this album actually ends up going faster. As you listen to it further, the tempos would end up becoming faster. So towards the end is where you actually get the most up-tempo and the most insane stuff when it comes to speed, but it still is not like this concept is consistent all the time. The issue is that I feel that this album is kinda toned down a bit. It was not necessarily what I was expecting. I mean, considering that this album is called Faster, I was actually expecting faster songs because we actually get some of the slowest stuff in terms of tempo, which I don't necessarily have an issue with them, but I believe that some of the best stuff out of Lil Texas come when you have those really hard-hitting and pumped-up moments, which I feel that they're kinda lacking over here. Like, I don't believe that this album has tracks that are as hard-hitting as Total Knockout, or From the Top, or Out My Head, which are my three favorite Lil Texas songs. I don't really believe that we get something that is close to that. We get some cool moments and we get some hard-hitting songs, but for the most part I don't really believe that Lil Texas provides some of the best stuff in this particular album. For the most part though, you do get almost all of the stylistic variations that we've seen from Lil Texas over the years, going into the many different subgenres of hardcore EDM and hardstyle, which even I myself am not to the point where I can really recognize the differences between them. I believe that towards the beginning we get some pretty cool moments with tracks like Revelation, which the thing I like about this track is the sampling. I think that it's really imaginative and quite cool. Even though it gets kinda repeated quite quickly, I believe that it still gets the job done. My favorite moment out of this album has to be the track Nedu featuring Kaizo. Honestly, I really liked many of the elements about this track. I like the production. I think that this is a really cool sounding song. Another one that I think it handles its samples and the vocals quite nice. And this one is more of like a mess of a song, as it goes to psytrance, it goes into drum and bass as well. So it fuses many different genres in a short period of time. But I think that everything that this track does sounds quite good. Then we get the sound out of Lil Texas that I don't like the most, which is with tracks like Reason to Live. This track in particular, I believe that it starts quite nicely when it comes to the samples and how it seems to go with the flow and the structure, but I can't really get behind those particular drops. This is a sound that would consist on heavily distorted bass but would not have the kick to it, so the rhythm would just come from the bass sections, which I believe that in tracks like this it sounds quite ridiculous. It's really over the top and I don't really believe that it gets the job well done on, making me dance. I believe that this particular sound would be more preferable with the inclusion of a kick, just giving a bit of a more punch and an oomph to it, which I believe that tracks like this actually need. But even with the inclusion of those occasions in this particular track, I believe that the bass sound just sounds so ridiculous that I can't really get that much into it. A track that sounds even more ridiculous in this regard, but in my opinion somewhat works a bit better because it actually feels kinda more experimental and out there, is the track Underground. I actually kind of like the really weird sound out of it, as it's more of like a high frequency bass sound, and I like the inclusion of the glitch parts of it as well. However, this is still a track that would be preferable for me if it had a kick attached to it, so that it would give it more of a punch. At this state, it doesn't really feel like something that I would dance to it feels somewhat lackluster. The track Donk Rhythm, even though it has two features to it, it somehow manages to be one of the most lackluster moments over here. Like, I believe that this track could have more to it, but at this state, it just feels somewhat empty and I wanted a bit more out of it. Then at this point is where I believe that we get a few just really not that great moments, with tracks like the Beatdown feeling quite forgettable, and then there is also the track Every Drug at Once, which features samples from Anthony Fantano, and you know, I like that inclusion, I like the novelty out of it, and it is a pretty fun song. However, the samples in this particular track are way too overused in my opinion, to the point where it actually feels somewhat irritating after a certain point, which, you know, you get some repetitive samples in this album, but this is a track where I really felt that it was too much. I think that it could have toned it down a bit, and it also doesn't really offer one of the greatest instrumentals over here. Like, I don't really believe it's that much appropriate to call this track in particular Every Drug at Once, considering that I believe it sounds kinda basic to the genre. It could probably feel slightly more appropriate of a title with an next track, Turn the Volume Up, but this one already has a fitting title, as in my opinion this is definitely one of the most hard-hitting moments in this album. It is one of those tracks that I ended up liking the most, as I believe that the energy and the amount of distortion and intensity to it definitely makes it one of the standout moments. I also believe that a track down like this is one of the catchiest moments over here. It was one of the sort of highlights, a track that I saw myself quite enjoying the more I was listening to it. And then at this point I believe that the album, even though it just goes into some faster tempos and just being more upbeat and slightly more hard-hitting at times, it kinda lost its momentum, and at this point it felt like I've already listened to everything the album had to provide for the most part. I still believe though that the tracks for the most part, even though kinda forgettable, they were a bit catchy. Like, for example, See You Dance is a pretty cool song, I like the catchiness to it, and I believe that it quite fits for this one to be so upbeat and this fast. And also you have the finisher, What Up Texas, which is kinda ridiculous, and I like this part about it. I like that it goes really fast towards the end, and I believe that it's a pretty interesting finisher. Apart from that, the album has huge portions of 90s rave scenes and also some old school drum and bass breaks. However, after a point I believe that they just become slightly tedious and not really providing that much more. They're in specific occasions and in all of them it just feels the same. It doesn't really add that much more, it doesn't really connect. And so I just believe that they're nice inclusions, but I would prefer it if it was for less songs, or that he would at least be more creative with them when it comes to the placement and their structures. Beyond that, I don't really believe that this debut album has really all that much to offer. It is a quite standard album for Lil Texas that doesn't really exceed expectations. It has some nice moments, and once again the production sounds really good. It's a pretty loud album, it's quite catchy, you can have some fun with it. But overall, it's just a pretty standard collection of songs that at the end of the day don't really show that much of the capabilities of Lil Texas. In my opinion, he can do better than that. I'm gonna give Faster a 6 out of 10. What's your opinion on this album? Like it, dislike it, why, and what do you want to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.